In the world of project management, there's a really fine line between a project that succeeds and one that just fails spectacularly. And that line, it's not about how well we spot risks, it's about how we actually respond to them. So today, we're moving past just seeing the storm clouds on the horizon. We are going to learn how to build the shelter. Let's dive into mastering risk response planning. So let's just start with a question that gets right to the heart of all this. What is the real difference between a project manager who is amazing at putting out fires and one who makes sure those fires never even start? I want you to just hold that question in your mind. We're going to unpack it piece by piece, and I promise by the end of this, the answer will be crystal clear. I have seen so many projects get caught in what I call the inaction trap. Teams spend all this time, weeks, sometimes months, building these huge, detailed risk registers. They identify every single possible threat. And then, nothing. It's like they're standing there pointing at a hurricane on the weather map, but they never pick up a hammer to board the windows. This is where good projects go to die. Just having a list of things you're worried about, that's not a plan. Okay, so to get us out of that trap, we've got a pretty clear roadmap. First, we're going to lay down the strategic foundation. Then, we'll open up the response toolkit. We'll even look at how this plays out in an agile world. And then, most importantly, how to turn these plans into actual reality. And at the end, we'll circle back and answer that big question, so you can become that crisis preventer. All right, first things first. Before we can even dream up a single response, we have to pass through what I like to call the data gate. Look, the inputs we're about to talk about, they aren't just bureaucratic boxes to check. Think of them as the strategic guardrails that stop us from making panicked, knee-jerk decisions when the pressure is on. So, what are these critical inputs? We're talking about 4 key documents: the risk management plan, the cost baseline, the risk register, and the risk report. These are basically our compass, our map, and our wallet. They tell us what the rules are, what we can spend, and where we need to focus our energy to get the biggest bang for our buck. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The risk management plan, that's all about our will. It sets the rules of engagement, it defines how much pain our stakeholders are willing to tolerate. But the cost baseline, that's our wallet. It tells us what we can actually afford to do. You can't have one without the other. This is the classic battle of what we want to do versus what we can pay to do. Okay, with that foundation solid, it is time to open up the toolkit. This is the how-to part of our day. And I want you to think of this like a playbook with both defensive and offensive plays. We're not just going to sit back and react to threats. Nope. We're going to actively hunt for and capitalize on opportunities. This is where the real magic happens. So for the bad stuff, the threats, we've got 5 main defensive moves. First, we can avoid it. Just change the plan so the risk can't happen. Think moving a product launch so it doesn't compete with a huge industry event. Next, we can transfer it, buy insurance or outsource a tricky component. Mitigate is probably the one we use most often. That's just taking action early to make the risk less likely or less painful if it happens. If a risk is just too big for our project to handle, we escalate it up the food chain. And finally, we can accept it, and we're going to talk a lot more about that one in just a second. Let's really drill down on acceptance, because this is where so many teams go wrong. Passive acceptance is basically just crossing your fingers. You see the risk, you nod your head, and you do absolutely nothing. Active acceptance, though, that is a strategic decision. It means you've put money aside in a contingency reserve. You have a plan B ready to go, and you know exactly what trigger will make you execute that plan. It's the difference between being a victim of bad luck and being the master of your own destiny. Okay, enough doom and gloom. Let's flip the script and talk about the good stuff, opportunities. For every defensive play, there's an offensive one. We can exploit an opportunity to guarantee it happens, like putting our absolute best people on a task to lock in an early completion bonus. We can share it through a joint venture, enhance it to make the positive impact even bigger, or simply accept it if it happens to fall in our lap. And just like with threats, we can escalate a huge opportunity up to the program level. This is how you stop value leakage. Leaving benefits on the table because you were too busy playing defense. So we have this awesome toolkit, but let's be real. In today's world, projects are not static things. The landscape is always shifting. That means risk planning can't be a one-time event you do at the beginning and then forget about. It has to be this continuous, living process. Think of it less like a document you write and more like an engine that's always running in the background, constantly adapting. And the absolute core of that engine, it's something called the risk-adjusted backlog. And honestly, this is a total game changer. Instead of some dusty risk register that nobody ever looks at, we actually turn our risk responses into work items. They become risk stories or research spikes that go right into the product backlog, sitting right there next to all the customer features. It's an absolutely brilliant way to weave risk management into the daily fabric of the team. And the beauty of this is, it just bakes resilience right into your process. You're proactively tackling technical debt, you're chipping away at uncertainty, and you are always working on the most valuable thing at any given moment. Every single sprint planning meeting now doubles as a risk meeting. What's more important this sprint? Building that new feature or adding a failover to our database to mitigate a risk? The backlog forces you to have that conversation and make smart trade-offs. It's not extra work, it's just the work. Look, a brilliant plan is just a nice idea on a piece of paper until you actually put it into motion. So now let's talk about the outputs. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is how our strategy actually becomes reality. So, what is the single most important output from this whole process? You might be surprised. It's change requests. Now why? Because almost any meaningful risk response, avoiding, mitigating, transferring, is going to change your plan. It's going to cost more money, or take more time, or require different people. And you can't just decide that on your own. It has to go through the official change control process to make it real. And that one change request sets off a whole chain reaction. We have to update our project management plan, right? The schedule and cost baselines need to reflect the new work. We update the risk register to show the new plan, who owns it, and what the triggers are. And, this is a big one, we have to identify any secondary risks. These are new risks created by our response. So, for example, if you transfer risk by outsourcing work to a vendor, you've just created a new risk. What if the vendor doesn't deliver? You have to plan for that too. Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. We started this whole thing with a big, critical question. And now that we've put all the pieces on the table, we're ready to answer it. So what is that definitive difference between the crisis manager and the crisis preventer? It all comes down to two simple words: action and integration. The crisis preventer doesn't just see the storm. They take decisive action to build the shelter. And then, and this is key, they integrate that action so deeply into the project plan that it becomes an official, funded, and tracked part of the work. So if you only take one thing away from our time together today, let it be this: identification without a response is just organized worrying. It's the disciplined planning, the seamless integration, and the relentless execution of your risk responses that will transform you from just another project manager into an architect of resilience. And that is how you build projects that are truly built to last.